All right, ready to dive deep into envy. You sent over this excerpt from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Looks like you're ready to tackle some pretty big philosophical questions about it. I know I am.
And, envy has such a bad reputation. But from a philosophical angle, there's just so much to unpack about it. Like even what is envy? Can it ever be, rational? Is it always bad?
That's what I'm so interested in, right? Like, that's what this whole Stanford Encyclopedia piece is getting at. There's this debate about how to even define it, right?
Uh,
Some philosophers are saying, oh, it's just being bummed out when someone else has something you want. And others say, no, 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 it's more about wanting that person to lose that thing, even if you don't gain anything from it.
Yeah, and that's a huge difference, isn't it? Like, is it just feeling bad because someone else has something good? Or is it actually wanting them to lose it? Like, imagine your friend, right? Gets a promotion that you were hoping for. You feel sad, disappointed maybe. Is that envy? Or just like a normal reaction?
I see what you're saying. It's like in one case, I'm focused on me not getting the promotion, and in the other, I'm focused on them not having it, even if I don't get it either.
Yeah, exactly. And that really matters when we start thinking about whether envy can be rational at all. If it's just about you feeling bad because you don't have something, no matter what, some would say, that's irrational. Like you're letting someone else's good luck control your feelings.
But we're always comparing ourselves to other people, right?
Yeah.
It's like built into us.
Yeah.
So maybe a little envy is just part of being human, part of living in a world where everyone's achieving different things.
I like that point. And this is where it gets even more interesting because we have to think about how envy is similar to and different from other emotions like jealousy. People mix them up all the time, but philosophers say there's a key difference.
Yeah, I can see how those two get confused. How
Yeah.
would you explain that difference, just in a way that anyone could understand,
Yeah. Okay. Imagine you're, I don't know, worried that your coworker is trying to steal your promotion. That's jealousy. You, them, the thing you could lose. It's like protecting what's yours. Envy, though, is more about just wanting what someone else has, whether or not it actually affects you.
Okay, so jealousy is like they're trying to take my spot,
Yeah.
and envy is more like, man, I wish I had their talent, even if we do completely different things.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. It's about longing for what they have. And that difference is really important for understanding those philosophical arguments about, is envy rational or not?
It seems like the whole debate about envy hinges on what envy actually means.
Hmm.
Like if it's just wanting someone else to lose something, yeah, that seems pretty irrational. But if it's more about wanting something similar for yourself, maybe it's not so simple.
It's definitely not so simple. And that brings us to this other idea that the Stanford Encyclopedia piece talks about, benign envy. Like some philosophers think there's a kind of envy that doesn't involve wishing bad things on other people.
Hmm.
It's more about being inspired to improve yourself.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Like seeing a colleague doing really well, and it makes you want to work harder, not because you want them to fail, but because you see what's possible.
Exactly. Like a young artist, right? They see a masterpiece. They don't
Yeah.
want to destroy it. They're just, I don't know, in awe of it. It pushes them to be better.
That's a good example. It shows that envy isn't always about being bitter or anything. Sometimes it's about admiration and wanting to be better yourself. But couldn't you argue that's not really envy? It's just wanting to improve? Maybe someone else just sparked that desire.
Totally. And that's where the debate gets really interesting. Like, where's the line between benign envy and just being inspired by someone? Is there always, like, deep down, a little bit of wanting the other person to not have their advantage?
Philosophers could probably argue about that forever. But what I find really interesting is how envy, which seems so personal, connects to these bigger questions about, like, society and justice.
You're right. It goes way beyond just one person. The Stanford Encyclopedia piece even says that some philosophers think that the whole idea of egalitarian justice, everyone deserves equal opportunities, is actually motivated by
Oh,
envy.
wait, really? So anyone fighting for a fairer society is secretly just, like, envious of people who have more?
It's not that simple. We were just talking about
Oh,
envy
yeah.
versus resentment, right? Resentment is about feeling like something's unfair, but envy is about wanting what someone else has. You can totally fight for equality without being envious.
I get the difference. So, like, you could believe in, I don't know, universal health care, not because you're envious of people with good insurance, but because you think everyone deserves good medical care, no matter how much money they have.
Right. And that difference is so important when we're talking about, like, is envy a good basis for political ideas? If we say every desire for equality is from envy, then we're ignoring all the ethical and moral arguments.
It's like saying anyone who wants to end poverty is just jealous of rich people, which completely misses the point, you know?
It does. It really does. It oversimplifies things.
And it goes back to that question about whether envy is even rational.
Hmm.
If it is irrational, then any political philosophy based on it wouldn't be very strong.
Yeah, exactly. So to figure out how envy fits into political thought, we have to go back to those basic questions. Is envy just a bad emotion we should avoid? Or could it actually lead to positive change?
That's what I want to know. I'm really curious to see where all this goes as we keep exploring, especially when it comes to political philosophy.
Well, and speaking of positive change, there's this other idea the Stanford Encyclopedia piece brings up envy-free allocations. Sounds kind of, I don't know, futuristic, but it's this economic concept that's all about fairness.
Envy-free allocations. Now that's interesting. What does that even mean? And how does it connect to everything we've been talking about?
So picture a world where nobody wishes they had someone else's stuff, like their resources. Everyone feels like they got a fair deal, you know? At least compared to others. That's what an envy-free allocation is.
So it's not that everyone gets the exact same things, but they feel like they got a fair share, knowing that, like, what I want might be different from what you want.
Exactly. It's not about everyone getting the same size slice of cake. It's about everyone feeling like they got the slice they wanted.
Okay, that makes sense. So in an envy-free society, maybe someone wouldn't begrudge, I don't know, a CEO their salary if they felt like their pay was fair, given what they do and how the whole system works.
Precisely. It's about creating a system where people don't feel like they're always getting the short end of the stick. Of course, actually making that happen is a whole other challenge.
That's what I was thinking. Is like what one person thinks is fair, another person might not. And there's always going to be some inequality. So how can you ever really have a truly envy-free system?
That is the question, isn't it? And the Stanford Encyclopedia article points out that, envy-free in this context is like a technical term, not about the actual feeling of envy, more of a theoretical way to think about fairness in economics.
So they're not trying to create a world without envy, but using that idea of envy to, like, measure how fair a system is, how resources are divided up, and how people feel about it.
You got it. It's a way to think about, how are things divided up? Is everyone happy? And does the whole society feel like it's just...
It makes me wonder, though, do we even want a perfectly envy-free society? Doesn't some ambition, some drive to be better, even if it comes from seeing other people succeed, doesn't that help us move forward?
That's a really good question. And it takes us back to that idea of benign envy, right? If a little bit of envy helps people be more creative, invent new things, then maybe a world with zero envy would be kind of, I don't know, boring.
Right. If we never see anyone else doing amazing things, would we push ourselves as hard? Maybe we need that little spark of envy, as long as it's used in a good way.
I like how you're putting that. It really challenges how we usually think about envy, as purely a bad thing. Maybe it can be a good thing, depending.
So we've talked about envy as this potentially dangerous thing, but also maybe as something that pushes us forward. So where does that leave us? How should we, as people and as a whole society, deal with it?
That's the big question, right? And I think, like most philosophical stuff, there isn't one easy answer. But the Stanford Encyclopedia piece does give us some clues. Like, we've talked about how important it is to know the difference between envy and resentment.
Yeah, because if you realize you feel bad because something is actually unfair, not just because you're envious, then you can try to fix that unfairness. It's not about being envious, it's about making things right.
That's it. Sometimes the problem isn't just you, it's the whole system.
And it seems like knowing the different types of envy is crucial too. If we can tell the difference between, the I want to see them fail envy and the I want to achieve that too envy, then maybe we can use that second kind in a good way.
Absolutely. Maybe the key is to create an environment where people feel like they can go after their goals, even if they got those goals from seeing someone else succeed. A culture that says, hey, healthy competition is good. We want everyone to grow and be their best.
Which makes me think about personal responsibility too. Yeah, there might be unfair systems, but we still have to decide how we react to feeling envious.
I agree. You can sit around feeling sorry for yourself, or you can use that feeling to make yourself better. It's hard, but it's a choice.
And that's one of the biggest takeaways for me. Envy is normal. Like all emotions, it can be good or bad, depending. What matters is understanding it and making good choices about how to deal with it.
Very well said. And as we finish up talking about envy for now, I want to leave you with a thought. What if envy, even though we don't like it, is actually part of what makes us human? What if it's what pushes us to learn, grow, and create? Something to think about as you continue your own deep dives.
That is a great question to think about. Thanks for coming on this deep dive with us into envy. Okay, so before we were talking about John Rawls and how he looked at envy when he was thinking about justice, he thought it could be a real problem. So how did he think we should deal with it? Did he think we could actually get rid of envy completely?
Well, Rawls knew we couldn't just, erase envy. It's part of being human, As long as there are
Yeah.
differences between people, there's going to be some envy. He was more focused on, reducing the things that make envy really bad, really harmful.
So instead of trying to eliminate envy, it was more about making a system where envy wasn't as likely to cause trouble.
Exactly. One of his big arguments was that a just society, a fair society, would have to make sure everyone feels like they have some self-respect, no matter where they are, economically. He thought if people feel like they're treated with dignity and they have a chance to get ahead, they're less likely to get all messed up with envy, even if other people have more money, more stuff.
So it's about making sure everyone feels valued,
Yeah.
even if they aren't rich or whatever, that they have a chance to improve their lives.
Right. And Rawls also thought that huge inequalities, like a super rich few and everyone else struggling, that could breed resentment and envy. He wasn't saying everyone had to have the exact same amount, but the gap shouldn't be so big that it makes people feel worthless or like the whole system is rigged.
So some inequality is okay, but it has to be a system where everyone feels like they have a shot and they aren't just stuck because of how things are set up.
Exactly. Rawls said people are more likely to be okay with some inequality if they think the system is basically fair and they have a real opportunity to improve their situation. It's about people feeling like they have some control over their lives.
This makes me wonder, though, did Rawls ever consider that maybe a little envy could actually be good for society? Like we talked about benign envy before. Could it be that a little bit of that, wanting to keep up with the Joneses or whatever, could actually push people to do better, be more creative?
That's a fascinating question. It makes you rethink the idea that envy is always bad, right?
Okay.
Rawls was mostly worried about the bad side of envy, how it could lead to chaos and unrest. But you're right, maybe a society where nobody ever felt envious would lack some energy, some drive to be better.
Right. Like if you never see anyone else doing great things, why would you push yourself? Maybe a touch of envy, if it's used right, can make things better, not worse.
I like that it really challenges us to think differently about envy, doesn't it? Instead of saying it's bad, maybe it depends how you use it.
So we've looked at envy as this dangerous thing, but also maybe something that can push us forward. So where does that leave us? How do we, like as individuals and as a society, figure out how to deal with it?
That's a tough one. And I think, like you said before about philosophy, there's rarely a simple answer. But the Stanford Encyclopedia piece does give us some good ideas. One thing we keep coming back to is how important it is to know if you're feeling envious or resentful, to tell the difference.
Right. If you know that something is actually unfair, that's different from just wanting what someone else has. And then you can try to change that unfair thing.
Right on. It's about seeing the bigger picture sometimes.
And knowing the different types of envy seems important too. Like if you can recognize when you're feeling that bad kind, the I want to see them fail envy versus that other kind where you're just inspired to achieve something similar, then maybe you can use that good kind to make things better.
Absolutely. And maybe the best thing we can do is create environments where people feel supported, where they feel like they can go after their goals, even if they got the idea from seeing someone else do it. Like a culture where it's okay to be competitive in a good way, where everyone is encouraged to grow.
That makes sense. It also makes me think about like taking responsibility for yourself.
Yeah.
Sure, some systems are unfair, but you still get to decide how you react when you feel envious.
Couldn't agree more. You have the power to choose, to let it eat you up or to turn it into something good.
And maybe that's the big takeaway here, the biggest lesson. Envy is human. It can be good or bad, but what really matters is understanding it, knowing yourself, and making good choices about how to deal with those feelings.
Well said. And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave everyone with something to think about. What if envy, even though we often see it as a bad thing, is actually a key part of what makes us human? What if it's a big part of why we learn, grow, and create? That's something to ponder as you continue exploring these big ideas.
That's a great point. Really gets you thinking, doesn't it?
Mhm.
So we've really been digging into this whole idea of envy, haven't we? Looking at it from every angle. It can be this really destructive force, but then we've also seen how it might have some like unexpected upsides. It makes you wonder if envy is so just ingrained in us, in how we are, maybe there's something we can learn about ourselves from it, about how we see the world and each other.
That's such a good point. I mean, it forces us to move past just slapping a label on envy, good or bad, right?
Okay.
It's more like, what does it tell us that so many people feel it? About how our minds work, how we function in groups, how we even define success and what makes us happy, Big stuff.
Exactly. It's like instead of trying to just squash envy down, ignore it, maybe we need to like lean into it a little,
Mm.
figure out where it comes from. Maybe if we get those motivations, those deep desires, then we can find better ways to deal with it for ourselves and for society as a whole.
I think that's a really smart way to look at it. And it kind of goes back to what we talked about before, that personal responsibility thing. Even if envy is totally natural, and even if there are things in society that make it worse, we still have a choice in how we react to it, right?
100%. We can let envy just eat us up, make us bitter and angry, or we can turn it into something good, something that helps us grow and become better. It's not about pretending envy doesn't exist. It's about figuring out how to use it well.
Yeah. And maybe that means like shifting our focus. Instead of looking at other people all the time, measuring ourselves against them, what if we really focused on what we want, on what's important to us? Developing our own skills, chasing goals that matter to us, not just trying to keep up with everyone else.
That makes so much sense. It's like the key to dealing with envy is to find that motivation inside yourself, to get joy and fulfillment from what you're doing, instead of needing other people to like validate you.
I think that's one of the biggest things we can take away from all this. It's not about never feeling envy. That's probably impossible. It's about being aware of it. Having a better relationship with this feeling, even if it's uncomfortable. Because it can be good or bad, it depends.
And maybe, just maybe, by really understanding envy, we can even start to appreciate what it can teach us about ourselves.
Yeah.
Like those deep desires, the things we really long for, might not be a fun emotion, but it's definitely something we can think about, explore, like a good philosophy puzzle.
Totally. And as we're wrapping up our deep dive into envy here, I want to leave everyone with a final thought to kind of chew on. If envy can push us to grow as individuals and as a society, then is it really the bad guy we make it out to be? Maybe it's time to see it differently. Not as a weakness, but as this complex and maybe even valuable part of being human.
That's a great way to put it. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. It's been great.
Sure.
And for everyone listening, keep asking those questions, keep exploring, and keep diving deep into the world of ideas.